Before I begin, I would like to open us in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the opportunity to share today how you are working through Cambodia. Thank you for the opportunity to gather in fellowship and worship you as well. Please be with all those at Stronghold and be with us today. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so this summer I spent 2 months at Stronghold, Cambodia, and I break down what exactly Stronghold, Cambodia is during this presentation. First, I wanted to mention the organization that I went with. I went with Mission of Christ Network, which is a mission-sending organization. They send mission partners to partner alongside already established churches, schools, and organizations for the purpose of intentional gospel proclamation. They currently are in 18 countries with 53 mission partners and have 35 international partner schools, churches, and organizations. This allows for over 2,000 weekly gospel proclamations. Stronghold Cambodia is a church and a school and a nonprofit organization, and so it kind of falls into all three categories. Cambodia is located in Southeast Asia next to Thailand, Vietnam, and Laos. It used to take up a lot of that region as the Khmer Empire, but over the centuries it is now one of the smaller countries in Southeast Asia. A closer up map of Cambodia shows where I specifically served. I served in Kampot province and on a tiny island called Fish Island, which is so small that it does not appear on any maps when you Google search it. And it is located next to the capital city of the province, Kampot. Some quick information about Cambodia is that its population is 70.42 million, with a vast majority of the nation being Buddhist. There is also a small minority ethnic group and Khmer practicing Muslim group, and then less than 3% of the population is Christian. It has a constitutional monarchy, which is similar to the UK. They have a parliament with a prime minister, but they still have kings ruling alongside the parliament. There is freedom of religion in Cambodia, which allows for Stronghold to serve its community as an open church. And there are many churches in Cambodia, but there is still a very, very small percentage of the population that is Christian, which means that most organizations, missionary organizations, determined that Cambodia is still unreached, which means a majority of the population does not have access to the gospel on a day-to-day basis. They may never encounter the gospel. Cambodia is known for Angkor Wat, which is the most famous temple. It's there. It's known as the 8th wonder of the world, and is the only man-made building to be on a flag. And then Fish Island, where I served, also known as Trai Co in Khmer, has a population of roughly 8,000, which is similar to my university town of Seward. It's a little bit more, but most people in Cambodia, most Khmer, do not know Fish Island until you mention the clock tower. So it's like a small town, Nebraska, that you would ask someone from even Minnesota, like, do you know where this is? And they'd be like, no. I'm gonna give a brief rundown of some cultural points, but with the time for the Bible class, if you want to hear more about these pictures, stay after church and hear more. They have this expression in Khmer that translates to same but different, and that really describes a lot of their culture. And some of these pictures just show like transportation differences. They have 2 major seasons in the year, whereas we have 4. They have dry season and wet season. And wet season, it rains and rains a lot. They have similar ways of counting and tallying, but a little different. They take off their shoes in more places than what we, like they take off shoes to enter the church. We do not do that here. They have roundabouts like we do. The students ride their bikes to school. They have to take care of the school and their art and their statues. Another slide talking a little bit about their culture. They also have cows, but then they also have water buffalo. They like their coffee and matcha. They have an agricultural industry that is pretty big. Fishing is also a part of that. And then they also have a silk industry in their agricultural industry. They like to play games, and they like to spend time together like kids in America do. That was really fun to just see them be together as kids. They like to fall asleep in cars. They have a lot of their art and historical buildings that are preserved are religiously centered, and it goes back centuries and centuries. Here in America, we have the Native American buildings that go back centuries and centuries, but colonial buildings are a little bit different than what their religious temples are. Who I served with this summer at Stronghold was a staff made up of Native Khmer and then also other American teachers. Pastor Jesse and Naomi are the heads of Stronghold. They built Stronghold about 10 years ago and have been serving the Fish Island community with Stronghold for about 7 years. They run the school, they lead worship and devotions for the students, and then Teacher Lynn is another Khmer staff. He teaches Khmer literacy and computer classes to the students. And then Teacher RJ is an American long-term teacher. She was one of the teachers that we filled in while she was back here this summer on furlough. Her and I overlapped for 1 month, so I was able to work with her a little bit more. And then Teacher Michael, it was the other short-term teacher this summer. So we spent about 1.5 months together serving Stronghold as the substitute teachers for the long-term teachers. And then Hannah is Pastor Jesse and Naomi's 4-year-old daughter. She was our little office assistant. And then Caleb did this summer program 7 years ago when Stronghold was transitioning to Fish Island from a neighboring province. And so it was cool to meet him and see how Stronghold has grown and kind of his experience with Stronghold. That was really reaffirming of like just how much God has used Stronghold and grown it. And then the students are also part of the Stronghold family. These are the 3rd through 6th grade students, and these are the 7th through 12th grade students. Yeah, it is one big family there. Everyone is very close and cares about one another and loves one another, which is really, really special. Inside the classroom, this was the main priority of my ministry, was to serve in the classroom and outside the classroom with the students. And so inside the classroom, I had 3 classes for 45 minutes every day. It seems very short, and it felt very short at times, but this was what was allowed with their school schedule. And we had lunch for the younger students, and then we would have class, and then they would have devotion, and then we would have the other half of the younger students. And that was in their lunch period from their Khmer school. And so they only had a 2 to 3 hour window where we could provide those services to them. And then in the evenings, once Khmer school was out, we would have 7th through 12th graders come, and they would have devotion, and then we would have them for 45 minutes. It kept things even with the younger students, and then some of the students also have Muslim school or Chinese class after seeing us. And so they have a very full schedule. We rotated classes. There are 3 classes for every age group, A, B, and C. And so one day you would have A, the next day you would have B, the next day you would have C. And so you taught the same lesson based on age group and levels. There were many lessons reviewing and introducing new vocabulary. One of the challenges as a teacher is sometimes you do not always see the growth, or if you are just repeating what the students know, especially when you're only with them for a short time. But it allowed them to practice their pronunciation, and that repetition helps them remember because it is their second language. They do not practice those vocabularies every day, and so this gives them a good review, helps them with pronunciation, helps them form sentences, which was another big focus of mine, was getting them to say full sentences because they know vocabulary, but sentence structure is the next step for a lot of them. And so these are just some pictures of inside the classroom. I loved being able to get the students up and moving and trying to get them to be creative with the lessons. Outside the classroom, was an opportunity for a lot of missions, just walking alongside the students. I spent probably majority of the days within the week in the evenings with 1 or 2 students at the very least, and most weekends spent at least a little time with the students outside of church. We went to different mountains, and one on Fish Island and one other one in the province. Ate a lot of meals with them, got a lot of meatballs with them, and sat alongside the river and got to meet some of their families. A lot of our students live on the same street, and a lot of them are related to one another, cousins, siblings, distant, extended family, and they all live very close to one another, and so got to meet their extended family, which was really sweet. Some other opportunities outside the classroom were home visits to 2 of our students on my last Saturday in the province. They were very welcoming. Khmer hospitality is very warm and welcoming and something that the culture is known for. But to be welcomed to their home is another step, and it was very just incredible to be on that receiving end of it. It shows the work that Naomi and Pastor Jesse have done in building relationships and building trust with the community, that they welcome other teachers from Stronghold to their homes. And so that was really just eye-opening and really sweet to get to meet more of the families. Got to spend days just sitting with the students, talking with them, watching the boys play soccer, getting breakfast with them at one of the students' aunt's restaurant. That was something that was really sweet on Fish Island, is that the families of the students, some of them had different shops or different businesses that we could support. And so we would get breakfast a lot at 3 of our students who are siblings. Their grandmother ran a breakfast shop, and so we were able to go there a lot of mornings and then cross the street to another student's family's home and get coffee. And so that was really sweet to be in the community, but especially with the families of our students. And they're like, oh, you are Barong, or a white foreigner. You must be a teacher at Stronghold, because the only foreigners that really interact with Khmer people on Fish Island are teachers of Stronghold. And so they were able to make that connection. And we were going with RJ, and they had already known her. And so we got to build those little relationships for our short time there. And then more pictures from getting meatballs with the students. They would take us on their motos because we were not allowed to drive the motos ourselves. The rules of transportation are a little bit different, and so there was not enough time to learn in order to drive. So we rode with the students a lot of times. And then more of the students' family. 3 of our students are in that picture, and then 3 are cousins of the students. And so just got to see them play and interact with one another too. Something that was really special about Stronghold is that they have served the older students for 7 years. Most of the older students have been coming since they were in 3rd grade, on and off at times, because the families were at first a little worried. They didn't know what it would be like to send their student to a school that was also teaching them about Jesus. They were a little worried about that. And so Naomi and Pastor Jesse continually kept trying to build those relationships and doing the hard labor of taking care of the land. And the students then came back and have kept coming and have gotten to learn about Jesus for several years now. And I got to witness their faith that they already have in Jesus and their love for him. My first Sunday at Stronghold, I had been there for a week, seeing them in the classroom with Teacher Diane before Teacher Diane and Teacher Tim left. And then that Sunday at worship, Pastor Jesse's like, let's pray for them. And on Friday, some of the students had prayed for the two teachers before they were going back to America. But then Pastor Jesse led this prayer and was like, let's put our hands on them. And it was really cool to witness the students just bow their heads in prayer for these teachers that they love and care for and have seen Jesus through. It was great to work with Tim and Diane, even for just 1 week. They love Jesus and love the students so much. And so to see the students also pray for them was really, really special. I got to dance and teach worship songs with the students. They got to teach them some English worship songs on Friday. Music is not my specialty, and so that was challenging. But I got to teach them some of my favorite songs that had a lot of repetition built into it to help them remember it. And then one day, Teacher Naomi was putting on like VBS English songs for the kids to dance to. And so I was dancing with a couple of the students. That was really fun. And then I think this was before class one day, if I remember correctly. The students just come to Stronghold. They get out of school early every Thursday, and then sometimes other days throughout the week based off of the teacher's schedule, based off of if they need the classrooms for something else. And so they just come to Stronghold because they have nothing to do at home, but they know if they come to Stronghold, they're with their friends, they can play games, or they can worship. They lead the worship music on Sundays and during devotion throughout the week. And so a lot of these students are part of the worship band, and so they'll practice the song for the day, but then they'll just keep singing, which was really, really special to see that instead of sitting on their phones playing games or something else, they chose to worship. And that.
Who came on Sunday morning, like their church? Who belonged to their church?
Yeah, the church is made up of the students. There's one adult that will come on occasion. I think she knows Pastor Jesse and Naomi. I did not get to meet her. And then sometimes like family or visitors of other people on Fish Island will come. But a lot of times the parents of the students do not come unless there's something special going on, like a certificate ceremony or a program afterwards. Our students are Christian, but they go home to Buddhist and Muslim families. There are over a dozen mosques, Muslim temples, on Fish Island for the small population of 8,000. And then there's at least one Buddhist temple that I saw. And so they go back home to these Buddhist and Muslim families that are supportive of them going to Stronghold, are supportive of them going to church. Most of the time it's just the Buddhist families that are, the Muslim families typically do not send their children on Sunday. Even if the parents were okay with it, the leaders of the Muslim communities might not be okay with it. And so church is a lot of the students and then their teachers. Teacher Lynn and also the cook at Stronghold, Sinoon, are both Christians. They are Khmer Christians that have converted. I think both of them converted when they came to Stronghold and started working for the staff. And so they will come on Sundays, which is very sweet to see. But yeah, a lot of times it's just the students and then their foreign teachers and their other teachers. And then this picture is of the students leading prayer for themselves. This is the worship band and the worship service leader. They were praying before worship service, and I was just really admired their maturity to be like, okay, we're going to pray over the worship service and over our talents that we're using for the service. They did not have Pastor Jesse or Naomi or someone else lead it for them. They took ownership of that and led the prayer. And then these are the 5th and 6th grade students that prayed for me on my last day of teaching. That was really special. I felt like I was on the receiving end of a lot of things this summer, and this was really, really touching. I was crying while we were doing some of the VBS songs with them. There's this one that goes like light, light, light of the world, and it's so cute with the students. And I just was crying because I knew it was my last time hearing them sing it. And then Naomi was like, okay, now we're going to pray for Teacher Brynn. And the 4 girls right away stood up. And then these 2 boys, a lot of times, will lead the prayers. And yeah, I was able to build relationships with all of these students very well. And so to have them pray for me was really, really special. After this, as the 5th and 6th graders were leaving, we have them first, and then we have devotion, and then we have 3rd and 4th grade. And so the 5th and 6th graders were leaving as we were trying to get the 3rd and 4th graders lined up for class. And some of the other 5th and 6th graders that didn't have quite as good of English were like, teacher, we pray for you. And so I had even more students come up to me after this and pray for me, which I thought, I was like, they're not doing it for anyone. They're doing it for God, for themselves, and for me, which was a really big gift for me. One of the things I wanted to touch on with the Khmer culture as a whole, I kind of blew through the same but different, but I have some time to touch on this, is that Cambodia is a very resilient nation. They have gone through centuries of being the Khmer Empire and ruling much of Southeast Asia, and then over the years facing war against neighboring nations. Angkor Wat has been, and the temples around it have been points of contention with neighboring countries. But it is still standing and preserved, and a lot of the temples around it have been preserved. And then in the 1970s, they faced the Khmer Rouge, which was when the dictator Pol Pot came in with his military and took over the city of Phnom Penh in the country of Cambodia. It was a genocide on his own people. Captured intellectuals, scholars, artists, religious leaders, anyone he deemed a threat, and anyone that would step outside the box, essentially, of what fit his view of an agriculture utopian and total control. It wiped out almost an entire generation. The age of 50 and older is massed into like one count for their census, and that population older than 50 accounts for just 1/4 of the population today. If you turn 50, you are addressed, oftentimes you're addressed with like bong or on, or there's other variations to establish that you are older or younger out of respect. If you get to 50, they might call you ye or ta, which is grandmother and grandfather, just because they don't have a lot older than 50 at the moment. They just had, this year marks 50 years since Pol Pot took over in 1975, and he ruled from 1975 to 1979. This woman has been working at what they call the cashew nut factory. It's where you harvest the cashew nuts, and then you also clean them and package them. It's not like what we think of as a factory, but that's what the translation is. It's where they do the work for their business. And she has been worked at this factory before the Khmer Rouge and then after the Khmer Rouge. Don't know her story during it. She came back and just kept working. Her response to after that was just to keep working. And she talked about how some people don't know how to work hard and stuff, but that's what she knows. And she seems so peaceful and content while having to very meticulously cut the cashew nuts open and package them because you might slice your hand. She uses a pretty large, like machete almost, to crack it open. But you see this population, there was a woman who would cook like fried pastries on the side of the street that we would walk past to go get breakfast some mornings. And she just seemed so content and peaceful while doing it. And neither one of them spoke any English, but we could do like hands. We knew enough Khmer to count up to like 2, if we, like when Teacher Michael and I would get 1 for each of us, and then could kind of listen for the number of how much. And they just seem so peaceful and content, and we don't know the horrors that they live through and what they might see some days, reliving it. They use a lot of art and storytelling in their art, which I find really, really beautiful. Their dancing has a lot of Hinduist and Buddhist roots in the stories and folklore. Like this one is of, I might get his name wrong, but the bird god Garuda, I believe is his name. And then I don't remember what the girl, but she's a princess / mermaid. And so it's the storytelling with those two characters from, I believe, Hinduist roots, which bleeds into their Buddhist practices today. But it's really, really beautiful. And they use art as an outreach program for their children. Trafficking, just dangers of being on the street, being home alone are very present there, like it is in our culture. But they have art outreach programs to help service the kids, like Stronghold services with education in a more English and computer class sense. This provides after-school programs for art, and so they learn more about their culture, they learn to dance, they learn to tell these stories that have been passed down through generations, but it also provides them a safe place where they can build friendships and they have adults that care for them. This is the circus in Siem Reap, which is nearby Angkor Wat. It was started by a Khmer Rouge survivor in order to heal and to, again, provide that outreach as healing and as a safe place for kids. And then those who graduate from the school then can become artists in the circus show, acrobatic show. And this story and performance that we saw this year was about the Khmer Rouge and a little bit about the story of the survivor and what he saw, but through the eyes of like a girl surviving it. And so this is how they depicted the Khmer Rouge cadre, which were the leaders and upper ranks of the military. They have also survived colonization, which was when religion was first entered their country, or Christianity entered their country, which is a huge blessing and gift of that. But they faced colonization when they made an agreement with France in order to protect themselves from Thailand. And so that had some repercussions. But they have really beautiful Catholic cathedrals lasting from them. And then this is also a cemetery in the middle of their capital city, Phnom Penh, in the center of a prison turned museum for 14 unidentified victims of the Khmer Rouge. There are still many, many documents lost of who these people are, who other victims were. There's some people that cannot trace past their grandparents, their ancestors, because all of that was lost. But if you interact with the Khmer people, they have the trauma still of the Khmer Rouge, even the younger generations, but they are very hospitable, kind, loving, and welcoming, and they are very resilient and have this quiet strength to them. Some relationships that I got to build outside of Stronghold that were really encouraging for the ministry and part of the ministry of walking alongside fellow believers and what they're doing for ministry was with 2 believers in Kampot province. We got to worship at another church in Kampot and met these 2 believers and got to have lunch with them and visit the salt fields with them. And it was just a really great way to meet people outside of Stronghold, because it's very easy when you're doing ministry to get inside your bubble and not be able to make those connections outside, especially in Kampot. There is a large expat community, but it's a lot of retirees from Western countries that may or may not have a faith life, and it's very hard to connect. And so connecting with people through the church was really beneficial. And great to see they provide Chinese and English classes as outreach and soccer as well. Michael met one of them at a church conference for all of the churches in Kampot that Stronghold had hosted. We had gotten back from Siem Reap and got to see this conference that Pastor Jesse and the other pastors and some members of the congregations attended, and Michael got to meet him, and we were invited. And then right off of the plane, very, very jet lagged, I got to meet RJ for the first time. But then RJ and I had served the same program in Cambodia with the other organization, but back-to-back years. So we had connections, but we had never met each other directly. And so we met our field lead from those short-term experiences at this cafe that the long-term teachers from that organization really enjoyed going to. And he remembered me, and I was like, "You remember me?" And it was so sweet. Unfortunately, I only got to go to his restaurant one time out of the 2 months that I was there. But he is very hospitable again, and it's always great going to his restaurant. It has the best beef lok lok. Rest of these pictures are also with relationships that I had built 2 years ago, that God had given me 2 years ago. I never could have imagined that these relationships would be something that would bring me back to Cambodia, even if I'm not serving directly with them. These 2 pictures are with my Khmer Krusa, or my Khmer family. I taught with both the wife and the husband, who are only a few years older than me. And they were my co-teachers for 1 week, and were very intentional about building a relationship, getting to know me, and invited me into their home for a meal. And since then, I have been in touch with both of them, talking about the most mundane day-to-day stuff sometimes, but feeling like we're doing life side by side still. And so I went to an engagement party with them in a Khmer dress and tried to fit into her heels because I did not have dressy shoes. It was a great insight into the culture, got to learn more of how they celebrate engagement, marriage, welcoming the community into those celebrations. And then got to spend the day in the city with them. And then these two pictures are with the heads of the school that I taught at with them, and then another teacher at the school. They took very, very good care of us while we were at their school, and I'm very grateful for them. Their little boy will turn 2 in September, and so this was my first time getting to meet him. Very, very cute. And then they also have a little girl that just turned 1 a few months ago, and so I got to meet her for the first time in person as well. And then the other teacher who is just on fire for Jesus and God. All of them are fellow believers, and they have been doing English schools in partnership with other members of the church to try to connect with the communities in their province, which is really, really special and cool to see the growth there. One of my favorite stories. I labeled it watering the seeds because that was really what my role was this summer. Jesse and Naomi have done a lot of intentional relationship building, and God clearly has worked through them in that and in their work of sharing Jesus, of having worship services, of having the students lead prayer, lead worship, really making their faith and their love of Jesus their own. And so I got to go alongside them and water those seeds of faith they have planted, that God has used them to plant. And this is probably the most evident of that. She is our only Muslim student to wear a hijab. There's only one other high school girl who is Muslim. But then the younger students, the girls might be too young to wear. Not 100% sure if they will wear or not. It really depends on their Muslim community on Fish Island, because there are a lot of different communities, and the conservativeness of them varies. Like, we have one Muslim student who will eat lunch as long as it's not pork. But the other Muslim students have stopped eating lunch just so they can ensure that it upholds their practices, which Naomi understands and has been very gracious, has been very welcoming, and has offered to uphold the practices and have the students help her with that. But the families have decided that they want to make sure they know. And so it works out with their relationship with Naomi and Stronghold to do that. But this student, she is in Class B, and always smiling and so full of joy and happiness whenever I see her. I don't know if she ever had like a bad day that I saw. She might have had days where she was tired, but I don't know if she ever had any bad days that I saw. But she would always ask me, "Teacher, how are you?" And was always eager to participate in class, and just always sending me smiles as she was playing the kids would play their version of hide and seek, and she always would run past me and smile. And then on my last day, the older students also were asked to pray for me while I sat in the middle of the circle. And one of the students had prayed for me already, and Pastor Jesse and Naomi kind of saw me make eye contact with this student, and I was just in tears, and she was crying, and I started crying more. And she had been participating in devotions. She sings, she prays, she's gotten to share during devotion about some field trips that she's done. And so Pastor Jesse and Naomi have been really intentional with that, getting her engaged in the devotions. And they were like, why don't you go pray for Teacher Brynn? And it wasn't forceful, it was just encouraging, like, you can do it. And so she came up and prayed for me, and we both were just crying. She prayed in Khmer. All of the students prayed in Khmer. But even though I don't understand, I know that they're praying for me and praying to Jesus, which is really, really special. And so I just held onto her hands as we both were crying. And Pastor Jesse shared with me, he's like, I am not an emotional man. That made me tear up. I don't know where this student is 100% in her walk with Jesus, but she knows Jesus. She's told me that much. She has told me some of the similarities that she has seen between Islam and Christianity. But she knows Jesus, and she knows Jesus loves her. And so I hope I got to walk alongside her and encourage her in that he does love her very, very much. She even came to church on my last Sunday to say goodbye, which was a great way to open the door for her to come to worship service, because most Muslim students do not come, again, because of their parents or their community leaders, out of respect for them. And so that was really special, that gave her an opportunity to come. And she brought a friend or a family member with her that was also a student. And so that was really special. Some praises that you can continue to give thanks to God for with me are the relationships that I was able to build there. I didn't know what it would look like spending this much time with students. I knew that my goal was to at least know their names, because I'll be honest, I'm bad with names, and teaching students for 1 week the last couple of summers was really, really hard to remember every name. And so building these relationships past even just knowing their name and being able to remember it has been a huge blessing, and hopefully got to encourage them as they opened up about their home lives, about what they believe in Jesus. The students' hearts, again, one of the things I'm in continual awe of is the students' desire to worship together. They are a very communal culture. They love spending time together, and they are very people-oriented. And outside of church, their culture also loves to sing and dance together. And so that bleeds into Khmer Christians. They love to worship together then. This is a personal, funny tidbit. I had no hospital visits this year. This allowed me to be in the ministry 100% of the time and be with the students without having to worry about myself as much. And then the ministry growth. Stronghold is continually growing to provide more ministry outreach. This last year, there was the Campot churches came together, and I think it was a nationwide thing as well. But they started a Christian soccer league for the boys, and so Stronghold was able to have students, residents of Fish Island who were not students of Stronghold, be on the soccer team. And so then they got devotion time before their soccer practices and before games, and then they got to start coming to worship service at Stronghold with their friends that were students at Stronghold, because they had already been like, okay, I know the pastor now, I know other students here, and so they are now a part of the Stronghold family as well. And Stronghold is always, always looking for more ways to grow. They have a youth pastor and his wife are now moved onto Fish Island, and they're full-time to provide more training in leading worship music and to provide some cultural dancing and more Khmer literacy classes. And they're hoping to figure out coaching soccer together, and then looking for more ways to grow and provide other classes. Also give thanks for the Stronghold family that Pastor Jesse and Naomi have built, and that they have the relationships they've developed with the Fish Island community. One of the parents is a Fish Island community government leader, and he tells the story of yes, we were a little nervous at first, but he's like, but Stronghold is so important because our children on Fish Island would not have the access to the English training and the computer classes that it does with Stronghold. They have a little bit of English and a little bit of computer in their Khmer schools, but it just is able to reinforce when they're speaking with a native speaker and when they have a whole class once or twice a week dedicated to computer and Khmer literacy outside of that. Some requests. One of the reasons why I talked about the resiliency of the Cambodia nation is that they have recently had some conflicts with Thailand. They've had feuds going back centuries and centuries. And 2.5 days after I left Cambodia, the border tensions that had been kind of going on all throughout the summer had increased into violent attacks and airstrikes. A ceasefire was reached fairly quickly within the next few days, but that it would be upheld and that any soldiers that are on the opposite side would be returned safely to their own countries. And then for the faith growth of the students, the seeds of faith in students would continue to be watered and grown. Teacher RJ is the only full-time mission partner going to Stronghold. They have other mission partners that are filling in the gap of the second English classroom because there's 3 classes, A, B, and C, and 2 receive English teaching, and then the one is with Teacher Lynn for computer and Khmer literacy. And so there is one English classroom that is having to be filled in through some other temporary solutions. And so that RJ and those can continue to water and grow the faith alongside Pastor Jesse and Naomi. And then in addition to that, Stronghold is looking for at least one more, if not more, English teachers, and there's a need for harvest workers everywhere. And so the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Jesus tells us this in Matthew 9, verse 37, so that more workers would be sent to Stronghold and everywhere else. Ministry growth for Stronghold, again, they have already grown so much, but that they would continue to have open doors to continue that growth. And then for me, that I would have contentment as I'm stepping back into my role as a student for the next year. I want to teach long-term overseas, but I have education to finish, and so just a prayer for contentment in this season of life. And speaking of which, next year, I don't know what I'm doing next summer yet. I keep saying that I'll stay home to work to prepare for student teaching next fall, but I don't know. I am still trying to discern where God is calling me to and what He's calling me to next summer. So that is an update there. Any questions in the last few minutes?
Can you see the growth of the students from last year or 2 years ago until you were there just now?
I didn't get to see a lot of the students that I had 2 years ago. I saw a couple of students at church, and they've grown up a lot. But their families have been going to that church for years and years. So faith-wise, really don't know about some of the students that aren't members of the church. I didn't get to see them in the classroom. I was there on a Sunday, and so I wasn't able to see. Yeah.
So Stronghold is noted for Christian worship.
Mm-hmm.
The people that go there. Okay.
Yeah. Stronghold is different from where I taught 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? If you think of them, I'm also presenting after church, so you can catch me before or after if you want to stay for that. I'll go through some of the stuff a little bit longer, maybe some different stories. And then there's some stuff up here that you can look at and that I can answer questions about afterwards. But I would love to close us in prayer before ending. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity to gather and again for being present with us today as we worship you. Thank you for all of the ways that you have worked through Stronghold, Pastor Jesse, Naomi, and the teachers who serve at Stronghold. Please be with the students at Stronghold as they continue to grow in their faith and grow closer to you. And please be with us this day. In Jesus' name, amen.